though. I'm going to do a lot of this presentation. We're going to go over quite a few different things. Some might be review. If you've been working with Just Add Power for a while, some of it may be new. So we'll go through quite a few different things. We also have Stephen Sharp on the line, which he's going to be jumping in and chiming in, as well as he'll monitor for any questions. If you have questions as we go along, just please toss them in that chat box, and then we'll get them answered. So jumping right in, if you see the screen now, that is me. Any questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to help on anything Just Add Power wise. We've been doing it quite a long time. So AV over IP for us is probably 8 years in at this point. So we've been doing it before it was the cool thing, I guess. So what we're going to talk about today, what does make Just Add Power unique? Now that even 7-Eleven has AV over IP, we're going to tell you why we do what we do and what makes us special in the market still. Feature sets, so we'll talk about some well-known features that Just Add Power does, as well as some lesser-known features that maybe will help you win a job or help you complete a job in better fashion than with extra pieces or something like that. So selecting the right product. So we don't force you into 2 SKUs to do a project when that may not fit what you need to do. We do have a variety of different products that fit on a per zone basis, and we'll tell you kind of how to pick the right one for what your project calls for. Building a system, pretty self-explanatory. Configuring and controlling a system, we'll actually go over what it takes to get a Just Add Power system going. And then we'll talk a little bit about firmware at the end of that. So basically what makes us unique to begin with is we are an over 25-year-old business, and we've been doing AV over IP, like I said, for close to 8 years now. We are one of the few, if not the only, just AV over IP brand. We do make our own product. We don't just buy out of, put our name on it. We actually build these ourselves. So
totally not too soon for that either, just saying.
No, sorry.
No.
So all of our tech support, engineering, and firmware is done out of our Florida location. So if you were to call our tech support or deal with anybody, it is going to be in Largo, Florida. So you'll never see a Just Add Power HDMI cable or Just Add Power speaker or IR or whatever it may be. We're solely focused in this market. With that being said, we did start in the IT world, so you can see some of the education stuff that we were born in with. So we're not an AV company trying to live in an IT world. We actually came from the opposite side of things. So all of our tech support agents are network engineers. We do know the control system, so it's a far different experience when dealing with a Just Add Power AV over IP system than calling in and this is one of 10,000 things that we do. So we do use internationally recognized standards for HDMI over IP. So we are using things like TCP IP, those kind of standards. So how do we typically hook things up? Pretty easy review here. We can work point to point. So if you do have just a long run that needs to go, simple point to point setup or through one switch, you can see how that wires, pretty basic things. A DA, distribution amp. So if we were to go through just a single gigabit switch, PoE, we're gonna show a single source on every receiver plugged in. Really no configuration necessary. I mean, those two applications do work. Do we ever do them? Yes, very rarely. Almost all the time we're doing, a full HDMI distribution system. Once again, pretty common knowledge, transmitter per source, receiver per display. In between that is your network. We build this really as large as you want to go. So no wasted inputs and outputs. We do say limitless. There are theoretical limits. I mean, some of these systems that we have out there now are approaching 1,000 pieces. So there's really no practical limit of what we're doing at this point. And then because we are a true network product, we live by network rules. So 330 feet from transmitter to switch, 330 feet from switch to receiver, fiber, we can go miles if we need to. It's really, you start to think about it, what can you do with a network? You can start to do with just a power system. Just a basic sample switching driver. So this would be, what it would look like within RTI itself. Automatic IP switching driver. That is a different thing with just that power as well, as we're completely control system agnostic. So we don't care if, you're an RTI, Control 4, Savant, Crestron, AMX. We have drivers and modules for all of them, and we'll take a look at them here in a little bit. We actually added 2 more this week. So if you've ever heard of Anato and Neats, we've added both of those to be able to control just head power as well. So once again, we are a network product. If data works, we work. So you don't necessarily need to go use a Cat6 shielded cable. Don't break the line. I mean, we can run a Cat5e, go through wall plates, keystones, couplers, patch panels. Once again, if you haven't noticed, if data works, we work. So we're a true network product. So with that being said, I'm going to run through some of the features we can do on these Just Add Power receivers and transmitters, because the list is growing constantly. We'll show you kind of, what the little guys can do here. So first, instant switching. This is unique to us as well. I know there's some that say ultra fast switching and things like that. There's also ones that take 2, 3, 5 seconds to switch. Here's an example of Just Add Power switching. Really on a wall we have in our corporate headquarters. So you can see as fast as you can press a button, you're going to switch video. So no blank out, no searching for signal, no blank screen or anything like that. No TV affects another one in the system when you're switching. It is a true instant switch. Video walls, I think everybody knows that we can do video walls as well. We do them quite a few different ways, and we'll touch on those here moving forward. So the basics for what we do video wall-wise is still just a receiver behind each display, and then that gives us total dynamic switching over the video wall. We'll look at that here in a minute. Also with that, full bezel and gap compensation. So it doesn't matter to us what the bezel is on the TV. Obviously, the thinner the better, but we can compensate for all that. We can also compensate for any gaps in mounting and that kind of thing. Here's an example of how we switch video wall modes. Just wanted to show you that we're not running a 25, 30-second macro over a wall to switch these modes. It's pretty much an instant switch. So you could see with the touch of a button how we're going to move in and out of different video walls based on what the user wants to do. So now we have, 3 by 4. You'll see we actually stretch left and right on this particular application. But here it is on game day. We have an HD SDI broadcast that brings it in from the scoreboard and live from the field. And then we have digital signage stretch left and right on the screens. Another shot of that particular install, we did the video wall columns. Some of you may have seen this by now, but we like to show it because it's the same little transmitters and receivers we're doing video switching in a home with. We're doing all these types of installs with as well. Another shot of that from the backside. One more. Concrete Cowboy. Might have seen this in your neck of the woods, depending on where you're at. But we also like this video because it shows intermixed single screens with video walls and really any given combination at any time. And then we make it easy. So how many rows, how many columns, what row and column is that particular receiver in? So it's as simple as that to change these video wall modes. We also added a while back the ability to do flip and rotate images in the receivers themselves. So no longer do you have to go find a commercial panel that you can put in portrait mode. We can do all that internally in the receiver. So if we want to do something like a portrait video wall, we can do that. If we want to do a menu board, we can do all that, like I said, directly in the receiver itself. There it is in the web interface. We can also do those dynamically through the control system drivers, but it's as simple as that to be able to flip and rotate these images. Mosaic video wall. So there's a couple different ways we do this as well. This one would require no extra hardware, where we're doing portrait and landscape. So something like this here that we did at a brewery, we can do a combination of landscape and portrait directly in the receive units as well without any extra hardware. Image pool, I'm not sure if you've ever used this or tried to use this, but this allows us to bring up to 10 frames per second back to a control system or software of what's being viewed where. So we can do this on the transmit side or the receive side. So on the transmit side, we could see what a source is playing before we route it somewhere. Or on the receive side, if we were to do, say something like a university or similar to that, to where we have an IT staff, he can see what's routed across campus without leaving his office. Some examples of that, here it is in the web interface. You'll see a little splash Roku screen under image pool. You also see some of the settings. Do you want it enabled? What image size do you want? How frequently do you want it to pull? There it is on some tablets. We have an RTI and C4 system. These are more of a residential setup. On the RTI side, you actually see what each zone is playing directly on the landing screen or the zone page of the iPad. Image push actually came to us out of the casino market, where they were not going to accept any blank screen, regardless if there was a problem with the source or anything like that. So we gave them the ability to custom load a JPEG into the receiver. That way, if the source were down, if it was powered off, for whatever reason, it's never going to say no signal or be a blank screen. It's actually going to default and populate that stored image in the receiver. So we've done that with corporate logos. Some have done menus, if it's in a bar or something like that. Residential, we've seen everything from, this is the picture of the cable box, go press the power button, to call us for service or whatever it may be. When we did that, we also added what we call image pop, which allows us to overlay that image on the screen as well. So we do quite a bit with the Buffalo Wild Wings franchises. You'll see their little buffalo with wings, a lot of times overlaid on any screen you're looking at in the whole bar. And then we obviously can be totally decentralized because we're not a fixed format matrix box. Anywhere you have a network pool, you can have a source or you can have a screen. Pretty easy. And then totally modular. There's a couple benefits to that. So if for any reason, if a Just Add Power piece were to die, we're just going to replace that particular receiver or transmitter. You're only down a source or a screen for temporary time. Another benefit, say USB-C becomes the next big connection or whatever it may be, we're just going to simply change a transmitter and add that to our ecosystem. We're not scrapping an entire system or trying to use these converters and making some sort of Frankenstein AV system. Long distance, we kind of hint on before. There's a couple different scenarios we typically do. On the top one, you'll see a point-to-point with a piece of fiber. We are using media converters back on each end. A lot of times we do this for maybe a mall kiosk or a smart board or something like that, maybe an outside single display pool area. More commonly would be the bottom one, which is switch to switch. With that, you're doing really any number of inputs and outputs on each side of the switch. They act as one large matrix with a piece of fiber between them. You'll see USB on some of our pieces. This is actually used a decent amount. So we can actually take pretty much and make a KVM over IP matrix as well. So, in this example here, we have 3 PCs hooked up to Just Add Power transmitters connected USB. We can take this receiver, whichever one we're viewing, we have full control over the PC on the other end. So obviously we do it with a PC or a computer. We've done it with DVRs, smart boards, touchscreens, keyboard, mouse extension, that kind of thing. A couple different modes that we do run USB over IP because there are various applications that require different functionality. The first one is multi-user. So really, multiple receivers can have control over the same transmitter, which sounds confusing, but in some cases it's what you need. So, for example, we've done some doctors and dentist office where there's actually doctors in different areas of the hospital, and they're circling on the same X-rays back on a single PC. More commonly, we have a single user, so we tell whichever receiver, the last receiver that switched to the transmitter, to take control over that USB device. So once again, we don't lock you into a certain mode or functionality when it makes sense to give you the option to choose over your project. And there's an actual use case. So we do the Nike Experience Centers throughout the globe now. They have these large touchscreen panels in the shops themselves, and then it's user interactive back with PCs in the rack. So we're carrying audio, video, and USB control out to the stores themselves. We do have a basic on-screen display. So there are some drivers out there that work with two-way feedback on volume control and things like that. We've done fire alarms, closing times, really just some basic text overlay. Now we'll talk about some of the control that we carry over the Just Add Power system. So we do offer CEC. I know that's been kind of a AV cuss word for quite some time now, where whatever we can do to turn it off. We've actually had good success with it. So control system sends a command, it travels across the network, comes out of a transmitter receiver, and then turns on a display through the HDMI or turns off a display through the HDMI. We basically use it for some of the more basic functions, I guess. So power on, power off, volume, input selection. We're not using CEC for apps and real in-depth things on the displays themselves. Once again, though, built into the driver, we try to make it as easy as possible to implement the system. You're not going in and writing any code or trying to figure out what command to use for what TV. That is the nice thing about CEC. When implemented correctly, LG takes the same command as a Sony, which takes the same command as a Samsung, that type of thing. And then RS-232 over IP. So you can see we do offer serial control. Let me pause this real quick. I don't know who viewer 1 is, but I'm not letting them take control. We love you, viewer 101, but so the way we do serial over IP is we do it as a virtual connection. So in this case, if your control processor had, say, just 2 serial connections, we just gave it 7 more on the Just Add Power devices without using any on the processor. The way we do that is the control system initiates a serial command, travels across the network, comes out of whatever IP address you want from a Just Add Power receiver or transmitter, and then we have full 2-way control on the other end of it. So there are a couple different ways to do that as well. One would be the normal pass-through that you've probably used in the past. This scenario would be come out of processor into transmitter, send command. Any receiver viewing that transmitter would get that command. The only reason typically I see this used would be if we had, 40 displays in a single location that, were all the same and we want to do just a power off command. We could program it to first switch to transmitter, then send power off command, takes the whole 50 bank of TVs and turns them off. Otherwise, we're doing it this way, where we're sending that command directly to the IP address we want it to come out of. So that usually makes more sense for what we want to do. Gives us individual control over every device. Once again, if you haven't noticed, the trend here built into the drivers, So very simple, drop your serial string in, put it on a button, and it's going to send it directly to where we want to send it. IR over IP. So if you do have devices that are still requiring IR, we do have a device that will add that functionality to the Just Add Power system. We never build it in as kind of a pass-through. We build it into where we do it across the network. So once again, it doesn't matter to us if you have any IR connections on your processor at all, because we're going to do this over IP. So the basic function of that, here's how it hooks up. We put what we call our flux capacitor into the RS-232 port on the Just Add Power piece, and then it essentially gives us an IR blaster on the other end. So we can do the IR over the network. So the audio functions, once again, something we do a little different than most. So first of all, we have what we call our AVP model, or the Audio Video Professional. This one has a Dolby DSP chip in it. The reason we did that was to accommodate for multi-channel zones and stereo zones at the same time. So you see on this transmit side, or the bottom picture there, we'll go multi-channel in with the HDMI, and then we'll send multi-channel across the network. We'll also get a 2-channel version of that source at that stereo output. With that, we have programmable audio delay and variable audio. That way we can keep lip sync in the zones we need to where we're extracting, as well as we can keep the source decibel level even. That way if you're going from, say, a DirecTV box to maybe an Apple TV, one's not significantly higher volume than the other one. And then on the front of that transmit unit, we do have analog audio inputs. That way we can embed audio. So if we want to embed, I don't know, doorbell interrupt or doorbell chime or mic or page over the system, or even do audio instead of the TV audio. It gives us the ability to mute and unmute those audio channels based on the outcome we want. All other models will support all the uncompressed audio formats. So everything from Dolby Atmos, DTSX, really whatever audio formats you want to send across the network. Another feature the Just Add Power has is we do have scalers built into every receive end. So from 720p to 1080p to 4K, we can scale on a per zone basis. That way we're never dumbing the system down based on a lowest common denominator. So if we have a bathroom TV that may be behind a mirror that's only 720p, we can still send 4K to it and scale it down. We can take, you know, your regular NES that's going through a converter and scale it up to 4K, whatever you want to do. Here's how it looks in the actual web interface. So this will look different if you have not updated to our latest firmware, or maybe if you've never been into one of our web interfaces. So logging into a Just Add Power receiver, you go to the video tab. All of these will come out of the box in pass-through mode. So whatever resolution you're sending comes out the other side, or we can lock it in based on what we want to do. So quite a few different built-in resolutions, or we do have some custom ones as well that we can really drill down if we have some kind of, you know, weird display out there. HDR10, we do support it on a per zone basis as well. So if we have a zone that's capable of watching HDR content, we can keep it on. If we have another zone that is not, we can turn it off. We're really trying to build the system and get the highest per zone performance we can get, instead of, once again, dumbing it down based on some legacy gear or something like that. So this is one of the lesser known functions of a Just Add Power system, but I like to make people aware of it because I think it is very powerful depending on what kind of projects you do. So it's what we call plug, play, present, and I'm going to run through a couple scenarios of how we use this. So first of all, boardrooms always have AV in them. People are always presenting in them. Usually when we do this type of presentation, we're in one, so we can physically show, you know, how this would set up. But we put a Just Add Power transmitter in the table. receiver behind the display. If I came in to present on my MacBook, I'd plug in HDMI to the transmitter. Once that transmitter sees video, we have pre-stored commands in the transmit side that say, I need to turn this TV on, I need to turn it to the right input, I'm already presenting. So it's actual automation without the need for any type of user-driven control. So I'm not going to get the one guy that knows how to work the boardroom. I'm not going to a touch panel on the wall. It's really, truly automated. Same type of thing when I leave. I'll unplug. It'll stop seeing video. Maybe I stored in after 30 seconds of not seeing video. Power off the TV, put the boardroom back to, kind of a zero state for the next person to come in. So that's one way we use what we call plug, play, present. Another way we use it, we do quite a bit of the banquet centers, hotel type of setup. So in this case, we have a corporate event here. They're showing their corporate videos when everybody's walking in and getting set up. We have a transmit unit where the presenters will sit. We have receivers at the projectors and displays. Our presenters come in, they plug in just like they would in the boardroom application. That transmitter is then given priority to overtake and switch and show its video over the digital signage player or whatever is playing prior. So once again, no control system needed. We don't need to go find hotel AV guy to switch it for us or hotel staff. It is truly automated. Same thing when we leave. Stop seeing video after 30 seconds or whatever we set it to. Back to our digital signage player and off we go. So some lesser known features that we've built into firmware that are very useful when implemented. So there's some of the feature sets that we offer in the Just Add Power pieces themselves. So now we're actually going to talk about some of the units and what makes them different and why we don't lock you into one or two SKUs that you try to make fit when it's not a fit. First of all, the way we start to think about things is we always start with a base unit. So our 707 PoE is as basic as we get in a 4K transmitter. So you see 4K, HDCP 2.2, all the audio support audio supported, the different control methods we talked about. Now we go from that base unit and we start to think about what other features we may need on that transmit side. Do we need to extract just stereo audio? What?
We have a quick question. I just want to make sure everybody hears it, just in case anybody else says. So does the wall plate use CEC to turn the display on?
Does it turn it on?
Yeah, does the wall plate use CEC to turn the display on?
We can actually do that control through CEC. We could do it through serial. We could do it through IR if there's an IR piece on it. So it's whatever control method we want to use. Good? Okay, I will assume so. So yeah, from the base unit transmitter, do we need to extract stereo audio? If yes, we would go to a 708 PoE, which is our next model up that gives us audio extraction. If we need to do things like USB or mic line input, all this stuff is very simple, but we want to not build one device that has it all when you're not going to use it all. So these charts are available on our website. We're always happy to help as well. Once you get into using it, it becomes second nature of what to use where type of thing. But this is kind of the flow chart that we like to look at. Once again, we can make this available. We'll make the presentation available. But it's kind of how do we want to use what transmitter and when type of thing. The nice thing about Just Add Power is you're not buying into a series of product really, because all of our stuff works together. That way, we can do what we need to do per zone, not, well, I need to buy in this series because this is where I bought into. So we will run over these different models. We do have the rack mount versions. We do have wall plate versions. I don't really want to spend the rest of the day talking about each individual SKU. because we can do that really easier with some of these charts. But we do have specialty transmitters as well. So if you're doing government projects that maybe have VGA, if you're doing a house of worship or a broadcast that's going to do HDSDI out of a camera, we have transmitters that'll do that. And then I'll touch on some of these rack mount versions and wall plates here in a second. So we do, like I said, make them in rack mount versions. So this would be a 3-input 1U rack mount form factor of our down mixing transmitter. So thermostat controlled fan, single power supply, all the audio embedding and down mixing that we talked about, USB, all in a 1U package. So that's 3 sources built into one. And then we do have our 747, which takes the Dolby DSP chip out and then gives you 4 inputs as opposed to 3. So just some other form factors that, you know, if you want to build a rack that has them, you know, in a rack form, you can stack them as high as you want in these racks. A newer piece for us, so if you are doing anything in the Dante audio world or the AES 67 audio over IP standards, we do have a transmitter now that works within that world. So looking at it, we did use the Audinate Broadway chip, which gives us 8 channels of audio in we could subscribe to. And we'll look at some of these here in a second of scenarios. Or we do have 8 channels of audio out we can send out and have Dante-enabled devices subscribe to. So there it is in the Dante controller. You see it shows up just like any other Dante piece would. But here's how we would use them in an audio over IP world as well. So one way sending our audio channels out, we would take a source into that just add powered Dante transmitter. We would obviously plug that into the network. All of the just add power receivers would get the normal audio video they've always gotten. But we also can send this now to any Dante-enabled device on the network. That could be a mixer, it could be a Dante audio speaker, a DSP, really anything that has that ability to receive that signal across the network. So that's one way we would send our channels out. And like I said, that is up to 8 channels out at a single time. A reason we would take them in, so another scenario, say we have this mixing console that has Dante on it. We can mix whatever we want audio-wise, send that, take it in on the Just Add Power transmitter, and then send that across the Just Add Power side of the network and pull it out wherever we have receivers. So that could be an audio or, you know, overflow rooms in a university, could be other rooms in a house of worship, really whatever we want to do as far as moving that audio signal around as well using those standards. So some other form factors we have, wall plates are very big for us now. We have a very thin single HDMI input, and then we have a VGA with audio as well. So just some basic, you know, in-wall transmitters that we're doing in these banquet centers and everywhere else. So a brand new piece for us that we did at CEDIA, it's actually becoming more popular every day, is what we call our warp engine. This allows us to rotate up to 1/10 of a degree of the video really any way we want. So examples of that, this is kind of what we were showing at CEDIA, where it doesn't matter what kind of rotation we do on a display. More of a live install, which would be something like this, to where we're doing video walls really at any angle we want. And basically we just add that piece of hardware in the rack with everything else, and now we can rotate this video. So now tiling versus some of the video wall stuff. We went over video walls. They make sense when you're doing, you know, 2x2s, 3x3s, 2-row, 3-column type of setups to where we want to dynamically change these. Don't always make sense for
Jeff, I'm going to interrupt you again. I got another question.
Okay.
This is on back on the warp engine. How is that different from Mosaic?
So Mosaic has to stay in portrait or landscape, where these you can mount at really any angle you want. So if we did not have the warp engine in the mix and just had transmitters and receivers, we could do the mosaic video walls, but you just have to keep in mind that your display is going to stay in a combination of portrait or landscape. Where in a mosaic, we can do it really in any layout that we want. So that's kind of the difference with that extra hardware piece.
Cool. And I'm just going to chirp in,
Yep.
I'm just going to chirp in, Jeff, as people ask questions, just in case anybody else has them. That way, it's kind of on the whole call. So carry on, my friend.
Okay. No, that's easier than me trying to monitor and do it both. So I appreciate it.
You bet.
So, we talked about video walls and where their applications are. Most of those, as we do see some in residential, we see most of those in commercial spaces. But tiling we see probably more on the residential side. This is where we're going to take up to 4 sources with a single tiler and lay them out on a single display or a projector or something like that in any configuration that we want. Might make a little more sense as we go on here. But as you see the tiler, we built this differently than maybe some of the other multi-view tilers that you've seen in the past. So first of all, you see mostly just network connections. So first we're going to route any 4 sources on our Just Add Power network to it. So whatever 4 sources we want to show. Inside the tiler, we can change those around any way that we want. And I do say any way because we do give you an XY coordinate and box size. So it really is infinite kind of how you lay this out. And then as you see on this last one where it says TX, we actually send that back out to the network, and it's viewable on any Just Add Power receiver on the network. That way, if you have a client that wants to watch a tiled image in the theater or the master bedroom or, the main floor or all of them or at the pool, whatever they want, it's available everywhere. And like I said, really any different mode you want to give them. So simple picture-in-picture, a split screen, a quad, really the sky's the limit as far as how you want to lay that out. So a quick video of kind of us changing the modes on it. Real quick, it switches in and out of different modes very, very quickly. And you'll see that green box that pops up around the video. So we also give you what's called a primary audio command. That way you can grab whatever audio stream you want off of the tiler at any given time. Because all 4 will be present, it's kind of, well, which one do we want to listen to? But towards the end of this video, we'll go back to single screen here for a second, and then we will actually turn this into a portrait display with 3 16:9 videos showing on it. So if you've ever been to somewhere like maybe a Topgolf or that type of facility where they have a lot of these screens in portrait mode, we can do this with our tiler. So we can turn the display into portrait and then throw 3 16:9 images at it. Just another way to think of it, a little out of the box or out of the ordinary than just okay, it can do a quad on a single screen type of thing. We can also stack the tiler. So if you have, the crazy client that wants 7 screens on his one projector or whatever it may be, we can start to, add more of them and show them all on one screen. So real quick on the receive sides then, kind of the same thing we did on the transmit units. We started a base model. Our 508 PoE is our most common receiver that we sell. Does about everything we need it to. If we need to extract audio or do USB, we just jump up to the next model that's available. So pretty easy stuff. There is a model that I want to show you though, which is the 509. We call it the daisy chain. So we actually did a loop out on the network, so we can then pass that network through as well as PoE to other devices or to our own devices. So how we would use that, so in this case we have a single network pull off of a network switch. We would go into one of those receivers that I just showed you, and then we could daisy chain them to do a video wall off a single network pull. Like I said, it will also pass PoE, so we're powering all of these units without the need for power supplies or anything else. Another way we would use it when we talk about multicast mode is we could actually do a single network pool to a bank of TVs and show different things on them. So we'll talk about VLAN switching versus multicast switching here in a couple minutes. And then finally, a few accessories. We do have a rack mount shelf if you want to do these kind of blade style in a rack. It'll hold up to 13 of them. Kind of, like I said, blade style. And it's anywhere from 3U to 5U depending on which units you're putting in there. And then that's our IR piece. So that's if you want to turn our RS-232 port into an IR over IP device. So now one of the other things that makes Just Hit Power very unique. We do VLAN switching or we do multicast switching. We don't tell you you have to do one or another. We do use one more than another, and we'll show you the differences. But we don't use really any kind of separate control box. We've looked at those in the past. They seem to lock up and other issues with them, but we'll kind of show you why we give you the option to do both, because they fit in different situations. First, we'll start with VLAN switching. This is kind of where we grew up in AV over IP. This is what our software tool sets up. This is what we do probably 95% of the time. So first, when you are doing VLAN switching, there is a recommended switch list. The recommended switch list is twofold, I guess. First, all the switches have been vetted. They have enough PoE budget to kind of run all of our devices. We do have a software tool that will configure them for you, so you don't have to really have much network knowledge at all. And then we do have control system drivers and modules written that automatically interface with these particular switches. So with that being said, what do you need to set it up for VLAN switching? We do a USB to serial adapter that goes into the PC, the console cable that comes with the switch, and then we need a computer that's able to run Windows or a Windows PC that will configure the system for us.
Hey,
From
real
there,
quick, Jeff,
we download.
we got a couple.
Yeah.
We got a couple. Sorry to interrupt again. It says hopefully we can go into the latency on the system, which I think we do cover some. We've got somebody that's designing a large video wall. They're very concerned with latency. So I can't remember. I think you do go over some of that, but if not, can we? And then I have another question that says.
Let me answer that one first, unless they're the same question.
Nope,
so latency for our system is 16 milliseconds encode to decode. And because of how we send the video, every receiver views that or gets that video at the same time. So you're not going to have any kind of out of sync video walls with Just Add Power. And like I said, through a single switch, we're going source into transmitter, single switch in the middle, receiver at the end. You can expect 16 milliseconds from that source to display. So it's hardly nothing.
He's wanting to make sure that's good enough for gaming.
It depends on your gamer, I guess. For a lot, I would say for most anybody, that's going to be fine. If you have somebody that earns their living on playing video games, anything outside of source direct to a display is probably going to be unacceptable. So that's the only answer I can give you. Because they're buying monitors with 2 milliseconds response times, and they're not going to add a single millisecond to that if they don't have to. I hope that's a satisfying answer. I guess it depends on the client.
Yeah, it's a professional NFL player that's opening an e-gaming facility. So, yeah.
That would be
question.
Something where we would want to get them on the phone and talk to them through it before it's acceptable, or give them a demo of it. Would be the two options we would want to do. Yeah.
And then I've got another question that says, what cable is recommended to run each screen to main that can do everything? Or does every screen need a separate wiring?
What's the question again? Sorry. With the wiring to the screen?
Yeah, I think he's asking is what he's asking. So what cable is recommended to run to each screen that can do everything? And then it says,
okay.
Does every screen need a separate wire?
So, I mean, if you're
wiring.
pulling new cable, we would recommend Cat 6. We can run it on Cat 5e. It can be shielded or unshielded. That doesn't really matter to us because we are turning it into data. And then recommended for each screen, typically we would recommend a separate pull to each screen unless you're doing something like a video wall where we're going to loop that through. Otherwise, we recommend doing a pull to each screen. Good?
Let me ask him, Terry, are you good? Yep, he's good.
Okay.
Do you have one more? Do you have
yep.
one more? Do you have support for Arachnus switches?
We have used them in the past doing multicast mode, which we'll talk about here in a minute. We are currently have, I believe, one in-house that we're looking at implementing into this particular software tool. So we can use them now, yes. In the software tool, as of right this second, no. So back to configuring a VLAN switching system. You would download our software tool on justaidpower.com, which is going to do the configuration for you. Based on the control system that you're using, we would have a couple different ways you would get that control system driver, and we'll go over that in a minute. And then the actual configure itself. It's pretty easy to run this. Typically, we're going to do set up a new system. Network setup, are we going through a router? Or are we configuring directly to the switch itself? So we select that particular button here. And then our network settings. So the network adapter is going to be the IP address your computer has. The switch network address is going to be whatever static IP address you want on that switch, and then the appropriate net masking gateway to go with that. So pretty easy as far as setup goes. Now the COM port.
One more question, Jeff.
Yep. Okay.
And I wanting to know if there's a limit to the number of screens that you can run off of the 508 PoE. If you're daisy chaining them.
There's not a limit of how many you can do off of it. The PoE power will run out, though, after 4. So if you go past 4 daisy chaining, you will start to have to use power supplies on the ones past that. And that is showing the same video on all those receivers. Now, if you're daisy chaining them to show different sources, it's going to depend on resolution if you're 1080p or 4K, because you only have a gig to work with on that particular line. And I can explain that further if we need to.
Yeah, as far as 509 PoE, but
yeah. So if it's showing the same video, you could go forever. You'll just have to start to use power supplies. If you're trying to do it in multicast mode, is it all one video?
So one source.
Or are we going to try to show 16 different things on the video wall?
It says no, he wants to, so probably 4. He's wanting to do tiling.
Tiling would count as a single source, so we could then just daisy chain all of those, but we would have to use power supplies. And this sounds like a very specific application, so I think we should maybe
I'll
pull that aside and talk about it.
And we can chat with him about it. Yep.
Yeah, we'll design it appropriately.
Okay, and then one thing we probably should do is let's get through the presentation, and maybe we can open this up for more questions too. I want to make sure everybody gets in, and I hate to keep interrupting you right in the middle of programming stuff. So.
No, yeah, it's fine. Once we get done, I'll just unmute everybody, and we can try to not do the weird conference call thing where everybody talks at once.
There you go.
Right? So COM port on the computer, that's just basically telling it where to find the USB to serial adapter on your computer to configure it, what switch manufacturer and model are you using, and then username and password on that switch. So once again, pretty basic stuff. This is the hardest page that you have to do on a config, which is how many transmitters do you want to configure for, how many receivers do you want to configure for, and then the default transmitter itself. So if the system were to power down and power back up, do you want to set a default transmitter for the system to view? So from there, this is how we typically set a VLAN switching system up. We always leave port 1 open. That's for control. So we're going to go ahead and jump that to the rest of the network. We're going to jump it to a router, or another switch, or a control system processor. That way we can find the switch on the network. Next will be all of our transmitters. So we put these in a row. We can configure for larger than is present currently if we want to build this out to be expanded easily. And then all of our receivers. From there, everything left in yellow, we can run normal network traffic. So we don't need to isolate the switch off by itself and just be a video switch. It's a network product. Let's use the network for what it's designed for. From there, it'll actually go discover all the just power devices on the network. It'll tell you things like what port it's plugged into, the name of the device, what firmware it's running, its current IP information, is it a transmitter receiver, and what variety. So if you don't see all your devices on there, you can rescan and fix it, clear and rescan, or it'll tell you if you have something plugged in where we don't like it. So pretty easy software to run. From there, it configures everything, sets up your VLANs, gives you IP addresses, updates the firmware, and then finally you get a printout of how that system fits. So once you run that configuration tool and get this is exactly how your just power system is configured. So we tell you everything from the username and password that someone put on it to the switch IP address to your just power transmitters and receivers, and you can edit this. So if you'd rather where it says stack and port, we could name that master bedroom or DirecTV or whatever you want to do. So that is the entire process of setting up, a just power system. From there, you'll see where it says static route information for router. If you're not familiar with putting a static route in, its basic function will be to give us the ability to route commands all the way to our just power receivers. So we're going to use this particular example here. We just type that same exact information that our printout gives us here. So 10 network, net masking gateway, just directly into the router. That way we can send these commands anywhere we want on the network. We don't need any kind of separate box or anything. Pretty easy stuff. And then finally, we can test that route. So within that same software tool, we can do test static route. And this will go out and make sure that it can communicate with every just power device on the network. So just another tool in that software that makes sure everything's configured as it should be. So now that you have a working just power system, it comes down to how do you want to control it. So we talked about some of the control system drivers. We do have a test switch function in the software as well. So this will give you full switching within the JADconfig tool. So, as soon as you run the configuration tool, you can video switch. You don't need to program a control system or anything like that. You can make sure that, it functions properly right away. AMX, Control 4, Crestron, or RTI are all maintained by Just Power. So we update those, we maintain them, we add features and functionality. All of these are found on the Just Power website directly. If you're using a different control system, typically it's found through the control systems themselves. So, URC, for example, would be in their programming software for total control. Same with a lot of these. A few more I want to run through, and then we'll open it up for questions. We do have what we call Switch Please. Is a free web interface control, and we named it Switch Please just because we're fun. That's basically about it. But you can see on my iPhone here, type in the IP address of our receiver. It'll go out to that particular receiver and populate how the system sits. So we chose to build this not as an app, so we're not going to any app stores and using username and passwords and trying to download stuff and logging in and all this other thing that we see everywhere else. And plus, we decided to do that because it auto-scales to whatever device we use it on. So we can give this to a bar owner or homeowner, and we don't care if the kid uses an Android and the mom uses an iPad. Like I said, it auto-scales to everything, live image feedback, what sources where, source selection, that kind of thing. There it is on the MacBook, just to show you kind of how it does scale. And then we'll talk about multicast switching. So everything up until then was based around our software tool and VLAN switching. Now, with multicast switching, we know not every project gives you the ability to go in and say, well, I'm going to add these switches to your network, Microsoft or whoever you're going to visit. They usually have an IT staff. The university has millions of dollars of network switches. They're not going to let you just come in and start adding, your own network products to their network typically. So we let you pick and choose based on what makes sense for your project. And we do have the ability to ride on these networks as well. So in this case, we were going to go into, let's just say a university or somewhere that already has an intense network set up. We would work with their IT staff or work with you to create a single VLAN on their network. All the Just Add Power transmitters and receivers would be put into that single VLAN. And then we could build that VLAN really as large as build that network of Just Add Power devices really as large as we want. So from there, the way we set it up is we go into our web interface for the transmitters and receivers. We tell it under system switching mode instead of VLAN to multicast. We give each transmitter a channel 1 through 10,000. So you can have 10,000 sources if your network supports it. And then on the receive side, you can simply change that channel to view a different source on the network. This also works through the control system drivers as well, just programmed a little differently. But once again, this is basically reserved for somewhere where we're already going to have a network installed and we don't have control over the network. So the pros and cons between VLAN switching and multicast switching. So VLAN, full software tool to do the configuration. You will get instant switching that we showed you prior. The switch processor basically does nothing but sit there because it's not having to monitor any join leave requests from the multicast groups. And then we have the auto drivers that will work with it. I guess some of the cons could be you have to use certain switches that we recommend that work with the software and drivers, and it's port-based. So once we configure it, port 2 on the switch is going to be a transmitter. You can't just toss a receiver in there and expect it to work. Now, the pros and cons of multicast. The pros could be any switch really that falls within the basic criteria. It's not port-based, so we can make the ports kind of anything that we want as long as it's in that single VLAN. The cons is it's more of a manual switch configuration, so you have to go in and turn things like IGMP snooping on and maybe some other settings within there. It uses the switch resources, so the processor in the switch is constantly monitoring what video needs to go where, and you do lose instant switching, and that's true with any multicast system. So just a few more things, and then, like I said, we'll unmute and we'll go from there. I want to make you aware of a software tool that's called Just Add Software. This does work in VLAN switching mode or multicast. It works on PC, Mac, or Linux. So if you ever run into a project where, it's a school or a restaurant that just wants to use a PC to control, you can run this software on there without the need for a control system. The part that I like of it, you'll see is there's a kind of maintenance and monitoring page. And you can actually run this alongside of a control system as well. But it shows you a snapshot of how the system sits. So what HTTP version using, what resolution, what firmware, kind of, IT staffs and people like that love to see a snapshot of the entire system on a single screen. QSC, we just became a strategic partner of them. So if you do anything in the QSys side of things, we do have a plugin that's built directly for the QSys system. It's an instant download through their asset manager. and then the plugin is a certified QSC plugin. So just wanted to toss that in as well. And the QSys plugin is only built for multicast systems. A few more things. If you think everything I told you is just a complete lie, and all I do is talk out of wherever you want me to talk out of, stop there. Here's some 24/7 operations that we've been involved with that kind of speak to the reliability and what we're doing as a manufacturer and a product. So moving on, we're almost done here. So like I said, everything firmware-wise we do in-house, and what we do is we add features. So very rarely are we developing a firmware to fix things, but more to add the features. So we try to make Just Add Power a product that gets better over time as opposed to losing functionality. And about that firmware, we do put really a lot or all of the older firmware on our website. That way, if you were to go into a system that was done, a few years back, had 200 pieces in a casino and you just wanted to add a couple, you could get that matching firmware and just toss that into a system that's been deployed, 5 years ago or whatever it is. We're not going to make you update the entire system unless you want to. Finally, in the web interface, there's your firmware version. There's how you update a single piece. Couldn't make it much easier to find. And then demo kits. Once again, if you think everything I just said I made up, we'll do a demo kit that you can put with. Typically, unless you tell me otherwise, it has a couple transmitters, couple receivers, some networking gear in there. You can run the config tool yourself. You can plug it in with your own control system. You can see it function and get used to it if you've never used it before. And then just a couple more. We did just win the Platinum Award for our warranty and tech support. If you've ever used our tech support, we get more compliments on that than really any part of our business, I think, at this point. But Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern. So we've got a good 12 hours of phone support, remote support, control system support, the whole deal. And then if you do need it out of hours, we can schedule things as well on a case-by-case basis. 5-year warranty on everything we sell. So if you have an issue with a Just Add Power product and we can't fix it remotely, call us. If the product's failed, we can get you a piece out, and we'll figure out kind of why there was an issue to begin with, and we'll do that for all 5 years. And then finally, extra training. This is in our new facility in Florida. We just opened a brand new, I think it's close to 35,000 square feet. But this is a hands-on, 2-day kind of classroom setting. There's gear in front of you. There's a presenter or a teacher that will go through all of this with you and go through kind of more of an in-depth Just Add Power culture, and that's down in our Florida headquarters. The way we do that, you pay to get there. We pay for all the meals and lodging